Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to change the strut on this 2004 S500 Mercedes. As you can see, the wheel is sitting a little bit lower than it should be. The strut's not holding any air anymore. Let me give you a closer look. On these aromatics, it's just gone. So we're going to replace that today. Now the first step to replacing our strut is we're actually going to go inside the cabin of the car. If you can see from the back here, there's a small access port right there. We're going to undo that with a small screwdriver. Then we'll hoist the whole car up and begin working on the strut itself. Alright, so we'll jump on in. And there's that access door. Just going to pry it open. And we'll set that aside. Next up, we're going to attempt to remove this headrest here, just so that we have a little bit more access space. Alright, so I managed to get the headrest off. There's these little black tabs right beside the columns on either side. You just press those in and wiggle them until the headrest comes out. Alright, the next step is to hoist the car. I'm using the provided Mercedes jack to lift up the back wheel off the ground. Next, I'll set up a jack stand underneath the rubber lifting point. I'll mainly use this as a precaution, just in case the jack fails. Then we can remove the wheel and set it aside. Once the wheel is off, we can get a better view of the strut. Make a note or take some pictures of how it's aligned in the car. Next, we're going to take off the big bolt on the control arm closest to the brake disc. We'll be using a 21mm deep socket. The other side of the bolt was also a 20mm socket, so you can use a breaker bar on one side and a wrench on the other side. Once the nut is off the bolt, you can take a small hammer and tap out the bolt. You can also wiggle the disc to ease the bolt out. Once the bolt is out, attach the nut to it so you can keep track of it. Next, we'll go into the cabin of the car and work on the top of the strut. It has 3 bolts and a pneumatic line that we have to disconnect. I used a small 10mm open wrench to undo the pneumatic line and a 13mm open wrench to undo the 3 bolts. I would recommend wearing protective glasses for this part. Once the top of the strut is undone, we'll take a look at the new strut for reference. The old strut has a thin wire connecting it to the car. The next step is to go under the car and disconnect the wire on the old strut. First, we'll dislodge the rubber grommet from the car and slide it up the wire. I would recommend wearing protective glasses for this part, since debris will fall in your face. Once the protective grommet is out of the way, you can see where the wire connects to the car. Take a small flathead screwdriver or small blunt object and gently work the receiving end of the wire off the giving end of the wire. Once they're disconnected like this, we'll detach the wire from the 2 points. Here's the first point. And here's the second point. Next, we'll remove one of the bolts on one of the stabilizers of the control arm. I'll be using a 16mm deep socket on a breaker bar to remove this bolt. You'll need a socket wrench with another bolt on the other side. Next, we'll take another jack and lift it up to support the control arm. This bolt has two washers, one on each side. Make sure to put these on the bolt with the nut to keep track of them until later. After that, we detach the lower bolt of one of the stabilizers. Just like before, you can reattach the nut to the bolt once the bolt is removed. Here's that bolt. Next, we'll remove the jack and move the control arm down to wiggle the strut out. Then we'll pull the strut out of the control arm. Be careful to lower the strut slowly and carefully around the brake line. Next, we'll hoist the car up even more. Be sure to follow the hoist up with the jack stand for safety. Then we'll gently lift the strut out of the wheel well. Now from here we can install the new strut in reverse. Keep an eye on what direction the hydraulic damper is on the strut so that we can put the new strut in the same way. In our case, it's facing towards the rear of the car. That way the hole and then the strut lines up with the control arm. Side note, before sliding the new strut into place, be sure to remove the 3 bolts on top of the new strut. Once the strut was back in the control arm, we attached the 3 bolts on top to keep it in place. Then we reattached the stabilizer to the control arm. With the jack and a bit of effort, we were able to line the stabilizer back to its bolt. Then we reattached the 16mm bolt with the socket wrench and the breaker bar. My camera died right around here, so here's some repeat footage of that bolt from earlier. In theory, it's just the reverse of what we did before, but in practice it required some decent lifting. Here's some more repeat footage to show you the final bolt on the control arm. Next, we lifted the strut while pushing down on the control arm to thread the bolt back through the bottom of the strut. This part was pretty hard. It took the both of us to get the strut aligned and threaded, but once it was all threaded, this process was nearly done. Next, we attached the new wire to the car. Then we slid the new grommet into the car. Slide this part of the grommet into the car and leave this lip on the outside of the car. Then we attach the wire to the 2 clips from earlier. The last step is to tighten the top 3 bolts of the strut and reattach the pneumatic line. Then close up the protective cover, turn on the car, press the aromatic button, and check to make sure there are no leaks. Hey, welcome back. It's the next day. I took my car out this morning, drove it around. The strut's holding out pretty well. As you can tell, it's sitting nicely now. We're not sitting on the haunches, which is great. All you need to do for the other side of the struts is the same whole process. It took us a little bit, so I'd highly recommend having 2 people for this job. I'm sure there are other ways to get around that, but moving all of the heavy pieces is pretty difficult for one person. So I definitely recommend you take that avenue. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe down below, and I will see you in the next video.